So, as you're homeschooling and trying to determine what to teach, that can sometimes be challenging. And so, what I wanted to share with you today are some ideas about how to help you determine and help you focus on bringing the arts into your curriculum. So, if you aren't familiar with them, what we're looking at here are the National Core Art Standards. And essentially, what this is from a variety of groups that came together and developed standards around the arts. So that's including dance, media arts, music, theater, and the visual arts. And really looking at what are the things that kids should be able to do, know, and understand as they move throughout their education. The other goal of this was to kind of help to elevate the arts to the same standards as other subjects like math, English, history, and things like that. You will find, depending on what state you're in, if you want to do more research, so some states have adopted the National Core Art Standards, meaning that as a state, they are saying within the school system, these are the standards that they're holding students to. And then some states have developed their own specific standards. So if you're curious about that, you can do further research. But what I really wanted to share today was helping you to make sure that you know that these standards exist and giving you some ideas about how you can use them so to make your teaching easier and to make it a little bit easier to think about what lessons you're doing and potentially selecting curriculum. So the thing that I find the most helpful are to use these at the bottom. So you can see they have assessments listed, they have standards, and there's even looking at some student artwork. I also really like to make my own handbook. So let's first go ahead under the anchor standards. Actually, let's go ahead and make a handbook first. So if you click customize your handbook, this is really up to you. You want to think about what type of information do you need. So as I said, remembering that this does disciplines for theater, visual art, dance, media arts, and music. So you could get into all of those. My focus is visual art, so I normally just go ahead and select that, but you obviously want to make this work for you. That's the point of the customized handbook. The process, the standards are all broken down into these 4 processes. So I would say to get started, I would actually select all of them, and then you could narrow down and get more specific as you go. For the grade level, you want to think about what grade level are you teaching, kind of what grade band. So I'm going to go ahead and select 3 to 5 on this. You can see that opens up more information. So you can get more specific. So if you don't really like the grade band of 3 to 5, you could actually remove some if you wanted to, or you could add a couple others in. So you can get more specific if you wish to. And then this is another part of looking at standards where they're proficient, accomplished, or advanced. So I think it's helpful when you're first looking to actually select all of those. Next thing that you get to select. So the EUs and the EQs, that's really looking at, EU stands for enduring understanding. So what is the overarching kind of theme or topic they're looking at? EQ stands for essential question. Essential questions are phrased as questions, and it's basically saying that we want the student to be able to answer this question at the end. So it can help, I think they're really helpful to think about learning. Process components and resources. Again, I think if this is the first time you're using this, it's helpful to include a lot of the information. Once you see all of that and decide this is something you want to get into, then you can go ahead and make other filters that have less information at a time. So once you've selected all of those things, you're going to click this, go to your custom handbook. And now you're going to get a bunch of information. So this first introduction is just giving you some overview of just what the standards are and how you're seeing them. Then you want to do a little bit more clicking over here. So if you click to visual arts, this is giving you an overview specific to the visual arts. and how this all works. You also can see down here, we're getting some assessments and additional resources. So let's go ahead and click on grade 2 and see what we get. So this is the Visual Arts Model Cornerstone Assessment for 2nd grade. It's reminding you at the top, this is for the visual arts. Since we selected all 4 of the artistic processes, they're all going to be listed there. The title of this is what they're going to be doing. They're going to be doing self-portraits, communicating personal interest. We have a little bit of a description of things that you can work through. Now, I will say most of this is written and geared towards more of the classroom, but there's no reason why you can't take this and just adjust it to what you're doing at home with your students. So students collaboratively examine and respond to a diverse selection of self-portraits. So this would really be pulling self-portraits and talking about them. Students select from a variety of provided materials and tools to create a self-portrait that communicates personal interest. So this could be something that you have your child doing. So you're giving them a variety of materials and tools. So that could be paint, pencil, pens, you could be doing collage, anything like that, and really having them think about how do they create a self-portrait that demonstrates what they're interested in. Students present their artworks and discuss why they are meaningful to them. So this is really looking at, they might present it to you, and presenting can be a variety of things. It can be holding it up and showing it to you and talking a little bit about why it's meaningful to them. They could be sharing that with other people in your family. It could be maybe you have a place at home where you actually display the work, and they could hang it up and they could actually write something beside it that tells a little bit about why it's meaningful to them. It's presenting really is kind of open-ended as to what works best for you, but that they're practicing sharing the information. Students group the self-portraits based on identified similarities and share reasons for groupings. So this is more if you were in a classroom setting of really having, and you could do this if you have several kids at home that are doing self-portraits, have them looking at the self-portraits that they created, what's similar and what's different. You could also do the same thing while you're looking at famous self-portraits and have your children think about what are the similarities and what are the differences. This is just kind of showing you what all is under here. And then this breaks it into a little bit more of like lesson plan if you wanted to. Again, as I said, this part is more specific to the classroom, but this will kind of break it down almost as your own teacher guide of what you can actually do. So it's taking all of those 4 processes again and getting more specific underneath it of what you could be doing at home to make sure that's happening. So it's giving you how are they responding, how are they creating, how are they presenting, how are they connecting. And then as we keep going down, there are more specifics for what your assessment might look like. So thinking about how things kind of continue to build. This is getting much more in-depth, but it depends on how in-depth you want to do. Some other nice things that are under here, they have vocabulary terms that you can be using at home as you're going through this process, and some more things that you can focus on doing at home. This is more ideas for instruction. Again, this part specifically is geared towards the classroom, but I think you can still continue to find ideas that might be helpful for you to use at home. Different ideas of how you can score if you wanted to. This is a lot of information, I know. This is, if you're not familiar with I can statements, this is really taking the child and seeing if they can do these things. So this is their own kind of self-critique. So this is them saying, I can identify portraits and self-portraits among other artworks. So yes, they always can, sometimes, or no. So if you wanted to use this as an assessment, you would show your child several famous works of art, some that are self-portraits and some that are not, and see if they can pull out the ones that are specifically self-portraits or not. I can tell the difference between portraits and self-portraits when given the background information. So this would be looking at portraits, and here we would be defining portraits as images that are specifically of people but done by someone else. So for example, if you did a portrait of your child, that would be a portrait, whereas a self-portrait is your child doing a portrait of themselves. So helping them to see what are those differences. I understand or can see that artists sometimes communicate something about themselves and or their culture in the artwork. So this is looking at some of those famous art self-portraits and really understanding the context of it and the content. So looking at those famous works of art and thinking about what is the story that the artist is telling based on what they included in the artwork. I chose materials I thought would work best for my self-portrait. So this is again for your child to reflect on. How did they decide what materials they were going to choose to make what they made? I created a self-portrait that communicates something about me. This is again for them to reflect on. Did they work on adding things in that are really specific to talking about themselves? I presented my work to the class and received feedback. So obviously if you're doing this at home, if you're in a co-op group, that could be the class. If you're doing it at home, the class can be your family. I provided feedback for my peers about their work. So this is really talking about, are they able to look at other works and provide feedback, provide thoughts? If you have several kids at home that are homeschooling, they could do this together. Otherwise, you could also, if you wanted to practice the feedback part, having them look at examples of famous works of art and think about what type of feedback they might give that artist. I examined the student-created self-portraits of my peers and identified similarities. So again, if there are no peers, then I would just go ahead and think about how do you take this and look at other examples of self-portraits throughout history and think about what are the similarities and what are the differences. And you can do that as number 9 as well. This is then for you, the parent or the teacher, as you're going through this. If you want to, this is kind of a rubric that you could use to assess the self-portrait. So I know assessing art can be really challenging, so this can be helpful. Obviously, you can adapt it as you need to, but I think these are really helpful tools to get you started. Obviously, you can also you don't have to use this entire document, but it could be a helpful way to give you a lot of ideas and help you to feel a little bit more focused on what you're doing. So jumping back to the customized handbook, some other things to help you get more specific is clicking on each one of the artistic processes. So if you click on creating, then what you're going to see open up is the enduring understanding, and this is what we mentioned some in the assessment. So creativity and innovative thinking are essential life skills that can be developed. That's what we're trying to help everyone to understand. The essential question, what conditions, attitudes, and behaviors support creativity and innovative thinking? And then there's a couple other listed for you. Then what you're going to see, these are the standards broken down by grade. So this is what you would have your child doing. So 4th grade, they're going to brainstorm multiple approaches to a creative art or design problem. So this could be really anything that they're going to create. And how are they going to come up with multiple approaches? Again, you can get more inspiration from this if you go back to where we were looking at the assessments. Pull up the 4th grade assessment and really have that focus on what you're creating. And so you can see, because I clicked a couple different grade levels, you're going to see several grade levels listed out in this document. But the standards are another way that can help kind of guide what you might want to be doing with your child when they are creating. So hopefully this is helpful as a place for you to start to really think about how are you going to bring this into your home as you're homeschooling and kind of focus what you're teaching. As I said, I really think the easiest thing, because you can get a lot of inspiration and ideas, is to look at these assessment documents and then break this down. You can break this down into a lot of lessons of learning about the history of self-portraits. This one specifically, learning about the difference between a portrait and a self-portrait, learning about the different looking up what these different vocabulary terms mean and then actually practicing those. You could also use something like this and connect with other subjects. So since this one is specific to portraits, think about what famous figures are you studying perhaps in your history class, and look up what portraits of those have been created